I often warn people because we did the warning at the beginning of the show, didn't we? I don't think I covered the warning as much as I normally do. So there may be some profanity. Just warning everyone. So yeah, there you go. It's a live show intended for adults. There may be some profanity. People on the age of 13, plug your ears. Okay, so this is off of Bounding into Comics. And this story is the Washington Post publishes an article claiming Star Wars and John Williams' score reproduces harmful prejudices in pop culture. So it says here, and we can't show you the Washington Post story for a number of reasons. The first of which is sort of behind a paywall, which always makes me wonder, is that why they really wrote this story? So people have to read it, so they'll sign up for like a week or something to read the frickin' story, right?
Of course. Anyhow, of course, that's why they did it.
So they're behind a paywall. So Washington Post, you're not getting my money, but they're behind a paywall, all right? And then the second one is, I just don't know how much attention I want to give it. But anyhow, the Washington Post published an article written by co-host of the Global History podcast, Jeffrey C.J. Chen, that claims John Williams and his Star Wars score reproduces harmful prejudices in pop culture. Not only does Chen take issues with Williams' score, but he goes after the entire film franchise, claiming in his article that Star Wars is shot with orientalization stereotypes, patronizing tropes that represent an imagined East or the Orient as inferior to the rational heroic West. For evidence of this claim, he proves to the conformity of the evil empire versus the scrappy American individualism. He points to the vague Eastern mysticism of the Force and its shallow come samurai practitioners, and the uncomfortable racial stereotypes embodied in the hookah-smoking Jabba and the miserly Watu. Watu, I think that's how you say his name, I forget. After attacking the franchise as a whole, Chen then specifically singles out John Williams' musical score. He details that the music for the heroes is done in the style of European romanticism, while those of the villains are inspired by non-Western music. Chen then declares that Star Wars builds on a long history of using Eastern music to depict evil on screen or to convey to moviegoers that they are entering an alien world. He then takes issue with Williams' iconic Duel of the Fates from The Phantom Menace. Okay, so we're going to stop right here. All right. How do I go about this? All right. I wanted to bring this up because within storytelling, okay, there is such a thing as playing with stereotypes. And there is sometimes this idea of playing with things that are kind of iconic ideals, okay? Sometimes because you want to subvert expectations, sometimes because you want to lean into expectations in order to build a hero up, tear a hero down, even sometimes build a villain up or tear a villain down, and I get all that. But I think the idea here is that it reinforces these negative stereotypes to discourage people from having an interest or being interested in these other cultures. So by being associated with these things, it permeates your mind as a young child and turns you negative or anti against other cultures, right? Or helps you indirectly develop a negative feeling. For example, he's talking about Oriental cultures, right? Okay, for me, it couldn't be more the truth. It couldn't be farther from the truth. Let me clarify that. I did not mean the way I said it. Could not be farther from the truth. Okay, I think this whole article is bullshit. All right, so I have a great fascination with Japanese culture, and specifically, I'm very fascinated with the idea of the feudalistic era, with the samurai. Because of things like Star Wars, I was inspired to actually train in martial arts and actually learn more about Eastern culture. So I don't see this. I honestly don't see nor hear what it is talking about. Towards the end of this article, it really puts out the idea. It says, do you think John Williams is racist? This is the stupidest freaking thing I've ever heard. This is one of the most celebrated film composers of all time. To draw inspiration from different things when you're crafting and putting together a story, everybody does that. Darth Vader's armor is inspired, by looking at samurai. But then so is Obi-Wan. Well, there is a heroic depiction of an Eastern culture and an evil depiction of an Eastern culture. I think sometimes people are looking at things too hard and seeing things that maybe really aren't there. So I just find this whole thing to just be kind of distasteful and weird. And we were talking earlier at the beginning of the show, this idea of misinformation being the new norm. Here you go. But this has been going on for a long time. But this, to me, is a little beyond the pale. This is really reaching. And the fact that the Washington Post would actually publish something like this, I find very disheartening. How do you feel about this, Eric?
Well, you did send the article to me prior to the show, so I got a chance to read it. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said bullshit. This article is complete crap. The only sort of, I guess, commentary I can give on this entire idea is I was a musician. I was a bass player in a band. That's why I call myself Bass God 14. I was a bass player in a band for many years. We did various demos, professional studios and things like that. So I do have a little bit of perspective when it comes to music and writing music and all that kind of stuff. And I can say that the one maybe kernel of truth that might be in here is that, yes, people do use certain musical cues for certain things. I mean, it just makes sense. And there may be a kernel of truth in terms of what John Williams' thinking was or whatever, as far as putting little musical cues here and there for one side versus the other, particular with style, because there might be something to that. But it's not what he's saying. It's not what this person who's doing the article is really talking about. What he's talking about is nonsense. It's pretty much the definition of clickbait. You talked about earlier how this particular publication is behind a paywall because they are cowards and because they know that they can't, they're not going to make money any other way. So there's a reason why newspapers are dying, and this is one of them. And so to me, it's just meant to inflame people. It's not meant to uplift people in any way. It's not meant to create any kind of rational debate. This is not someone who is trying to make anything better or uplift anyone or anything like that. He is just being a jerk. He's just being a jerk. That's the bottom line. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up. It kind of went along with what we led the pop culture news segment off in its own way. But I couldn't believe that's, because you do want to have contrasts between things, or you want things to clash or things to be different, to show the differences between a heroic movement and a villainous movement and whatever. And I get that. But I always felt more Nazi, you know what I mean, with the empire than...
Well, what's the Imperial March? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So
I don't get it. I just sometimes I feel like these people are really reaching at stuff. And like I said, this Washington Post article, I want to thank Bounty into Comics for pointing this out, because I find that this is just some real bullshit. Now I don't remember after reading this article how the gentleman who wrote this on Bounty into Comics feels about it, but I can just tell you right now that I just call it total bullshit, because while John Williams may have been thinking about having competing themes, right, or themes that clash in order to show differences between the two.
That's the psych operation. That's the little kernel of truth,
Right.
Because I get that. As someone who's done music, I get that. So
yeah, and as a storyteller, that's like I said, that's sometimes what you do. You will take these iconic, ideas that people have built up in their minds, whether visual or whatever, and you'll take them and you'll contrast them. But I don't know. I just some of this stuff to me just feels really reaching. So
we do have a good comment here that I want to acknowledge, which is some articles are tainted with writers' own agendas and cosmovision, which I take to mean their cosmology, their own personal worldview, because they themselves view the world this way. They're going to try to make everything else fit into their worldview. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I totally see that in this article. This is someone that has a particular worldview, and he wants you to see the things the way that he does. So,
yeah. So anyhow, just wanted to point that out. We can move on. I don't want to talk about this anymore before I start cursing up the storm.